Hello. Okay. Basically, I was editing together this part, and I got it all finished, got it processing, started it up, and there was no sound at all. And whatever I do, I cannot seem to relocate the sound. So, as an alternative, I'm just gonna kind of read over it. Got a book about Dark Souls, You Died by Keza MacDonald and Jason Killingsworth. I'm just gonna read a few bits of that for 10 minutes. So enjoy. Oh, just one thing very quickly about this fight. This was really interesting to me because I had no idea that Dark Wraiths could just wander through fog gates and start fighting the bosses with me. Is that a common occurrence that I just didn't know about? I'm very curious as to if that has been used as a strategy in any way, or if it's some weird glitch or not. But it was entertaining, regardless. Anyway, book. I'm going to read Where Dark Souls Came From, an origin story by Keza MacDonald. The book is kind of a collection of essays on Dark Souls. It's very interesting. It's a good book. I would highly recommend it. Okay. Dark Souls seemed to appear out of nowhere. It was an inexplicably extraordinary game from a little-known Japanese developer whose previous work had hardly set the world on fire. Indeed, many of From Software's releases never made it out of Japan. But Dark Souls was, of course, not the first Souls game, and From Software had been quietly working away on a variety of titles for 25 years before its breakout hit. From its founding in 1986 until the mid-90s, the company made office software, but its first ever game was a foreshadowing of what was to come. Demon's Souls might have been the first game with souls in its title, but the spiritual beginning of the series stretches back to the launch of the original Sony PlayStation in 1994. That was the year that From Software released its first game, Kingsfield, a bleak 3D dungeon-crawling role-playing game with a sadistically challenging streak that would make any Dark Souls fan raise an eyebrow in recognition. It came out just 2 weeks after the PlayStation first went on sale in Japan, on the 16th of December 1994, and it is a near impenetrable experience for any modern player. Its extreme difficulty, in combination with the muddiness of early 3D graphics and juddering frame rate, make it difficult to stomach today, like many early 3D games. It is throttled by the limitations of its technology. But it was nonetheless interesting and groundbreaking enough to attract some attention at the time. Kingsfield is, in a word, obtuse. You view the world through the eyes of John Alfred Forrester, a member of the royal family of Verdite, a kingdom that is not doing so well of late. What with all the curses and undead, sound familiar? Its dungeons are mazes full of things that are trying to kill you, and your only defense against them is a small selection of weapons that you laboriously swing around in front of you in a comically slow arc, plus a few spells. Actually hitting anything feels as much a matter of fortune as positioning, and you move like you're walking through knee-deep mud. The first thing that happens when you start the game is that you die within a few minutes, likely at the bony hands of a skeleton standing close to where you start off. This has since become a From Software tradition. From Software made 3 more Kingsfield games, in 1996, 1997 and 2001. Like Demon's Souls, the first of them was a Japan-only game. It was never translated into English officially, though a fan-made patch exists that can convert its text to an emulator. The 3 sequels all made it to North America and Europe, where players were mostly bemused by their unforgiving nature and basic appearance and controls. But the Kingsfield games were deeply unusual for their time, and nonetheless built up a small but passionate following of their own throughout the 1990s. They have become sought-after curiosities for especially devoted Souls fans, partly because they also contain a few references that later appeared in Dark Souls. A dragon named Seath, for instance, was one of the series' recurring foes. What they have in common with Demon's Souls which is hailed by many fans as Kingfield's spiritual successor, although not, as we'll get to later, by From itself or by the Soul's director, Hidetaka Miyazaki, is more a general ambience than any specific concrete ideas or mechanics. It's oppressive. It gives you absolutely no direction, and it doesn't mind killing you at a second's notice. It has minimalist but affecting sound design, and the discomforting enemies have a touch of the otherworldly about them, once you get past the skeletons. Later Kingsfield games have an open world structure, inviting you to go anywhere you like, but making it clear that you'll probably suffer if you do. The Kingsfield games are about changing up your weapons and equipment to improve your chances against different enemies, rather than rolling a character specifically for a certain playstyle, say a mage or a warrior. Most significantly, enjoying Kingsfield requires a certain obstinacy that a lot of Souls players will recognise in themselves, a determination to overcome the odds. In Kingsfield 2, the first in the series to be released overseas, you begin washed up on an island. Two of the directions open to you lead directly to death, delivered either by plunging into the deep water, or by a boss monster that will squish you in 5 seconds. Kingsfield 4 starts you opposite a lava pit that you're very likely to just walk straight into. There's a shared sense of humour there, as well as the claustrophobic atmosphere and sense of helpless isolation. Apart from Kingsfield, From Software busied itself with all sorts of different games throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. Other forays into RPG and adventure games included Echo Knight, Eternal Ring, and Shadow Tower, all of which shared some dungeon crawling design points from Kingsfield. Lost Kingdoms was a card battling RPG from Nintendo's GameCube, fondly remembered by a lot of people who played it despite a tepid reception from critics. Before Souls, From Software's most successful series of games by far was Armored Core, a detailed and deadly serious series of mecha games for the PlayStation consoles. I'm personally partial to big stompy robots, so I've enjoyed several of them. It is an intimidating series, as devoted to detail and realism as any game about imaginary war machines has ever been. And like many of From's other creations, the early Armored Core games were so ambitious that they struggled to fit onto the hardware available to them. The first Armored Core on the original PlayStation had one of the weirdest control systems ever committed to a gamepad. You had to look up and down with the shoulder buttons. I remember that. It was interesting. As Armored Core evolved though, the technology caught up with it, and some of the later games are among the best mecha games out there. One of the key components of the series' success was that it did not patronize players. With hundreds, if not thousands, of different parts and weapons with which to customize their mechs, each with different balancing implications, Armored Core's players were left to figure it out for themselves. The series has inspired devoted loyalty. There are still people out there posting pictures and stats of their mecha builds to fan-run Armored Core forums, sometimes for games that are over 10 years old. From also developed Chrome Hounds, another mecha game for the Xbox 360, and and Frame Gride for the Dreamcast, which had more humanoid mechs. From also developed Chrome Hounds, another mecha game for the Xbox 360, and Frame Gride for the Dreamcast, which had more humanoid mechs. My favourite of all From's robot-themed output is Metal Wolf Chaos, a legitimately insane Xbox game that puts the President of the United States in a combat mecha and has him personally kicking the asses of invading robot armies. Tragically, it was never released in America. Armored Core is what funded a lot of From's other development efforts, including Otogai, an Eastern-styled third-person demon-slaying hack-and-slash game for the Xbox, and The Adventures of Cookies and Cream, a cutesy cooperative platformer designed for 2 players. There was one attempt at a classic Japanese RPG format in Enchanted Arms, which fell flat both at home and abroad in terms of sales and reception. Most importantly for our purposes though, Armored Core's success allowed From Software to start on another dark fantasy role-playing game, years after it had left Kingsfield behind. that game was Demon Souls. Okay, that's enough. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the book. I'm gonna link it down below because it's great and you should all read it. Bye.